Kia ora koutou, ko Liz Remaswal aho. I'm Liz Remaswal from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I'm living in Heretaunga, Hawke's Bay, and co-facilitator for Pacific Peace Network and also Vice President of World Beyond War. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to everybody who has contributed to our session today and is going to make for a really interesting time. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge all of the first and traditional custodians on the lands and waters on which we live and beside which we live, and acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land today, our sorrow for the costs of that sharing, and our hope that we can move towards a place of justice and partnership together. So today we have got about 9 wonderful presentations from people from 9 different countries in the Pacifica, Asia, Australian, Aotearoa area. And we are here to discuss the recent Declaration for an Ocean of Peace issued at the Pacific Islands Forums in September. So we're very, very lucky to have as our first and our keynote speaker, Rev James Bhagwan, who is in Fiji, and he is the Secretary General of the Pacific Conference of Churches. Kia ora and welcome, Reverend James. Reverend James will share how the declaration was developed and presented and what the challenges are in effective implementation. So James will be speaking for how long is it? 10 minutes?
That's
10
right.
minutes. And the rest of our speakers will be speaking for 5 minutes. And James, you've asked if we give you a bell at 9 minutes. So thank you and welcome. And it's so good to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Nisambula Vinaka, warm Pacific greetings. Acknowledge that all cultural, traditional, spiritual protocols have been observed, and bring you warm greetings from the Pacific Conference of Churches. The Ocean of Peace idea emerged in mid-2023 when Fiji's Ministry of Foreign Affairs circulated a concept paper on a Pacific Ocean zone of peace. And that set out principles of non-militarization, nuclear freedom, Pacific peaceful settlements of dispute, and respect for sovereignty and self-determination. Fiji's Prime Minister Rambuka then took this proposal to the Pacific Islands Forum, where officials shaped it to sit alongside the Bowie Declaration and the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. And the forum leaders adopted the Blue Pacific Ocean of Peace Declaration at their 54th meeting in Honiara this year as a political commitment to shield our region from great power rivalry and place peace, stability, and development at the center of regional cooperation. From an inclusive, non-traditional security perspective, the Ocean of Peace could be far more than just a regional security text. It could become a shared framework for human security and well-being in the Pacific, where peace is measured not only by the absence of war, but whether women can safely trade in our markets, whether young people can find dignified work, whether persons with disabilities can move freely and participate, and whether maritime families can live from a healthy ocean. So for the Pacific Conference of Churches and for me, the test of an inclusive ocean of peace is very practical. Will this declaration actually improve the life and dignity of our women, our young people, persons with disabilities, and maritime communities? And if the answer is no, then it's not peace, it's publicity. And from that lens, there are some things that are missing. And I will talk firstly about some of the gaps, what's missing, before talking about how this actually works in principle. The first thing to note is that the declaration doesn't really speak the language of our indigenous understandings of peace. In Fiji, we have Sautu, Tonga, we have Melino. There are other Pacific languages, all of them that describe a more robust understanding of peace as wholeness and right relationship. So this gives a very limited attention to the everyday violence in our homes, in our communities, or to the way that militarization itself fuels toxic masculinities. It leaves a lot of work for us as churches and civil society to reinterpret peace and security in people-centered relational terms. It's also important to note that we can't understand the ocean of peace without the long shadow of geopolitics in our region. And I note that our other speakers will probably touch on this. But it's important to understand that the Solomon Islands itself, where the leaders adopted the declaration, still carries the scars of World War II in its land and in its waters. Our wider Blue Pacific carries the radioactive legacy of nuclear testing, nuclear weapons use, missile flights, and today, renewed interest in bases and ports and strategic denial. At the same time, we live with the ecological crisis of accelerating climate change, rising seas, stronger cyclones, ocean degradation, and the looming threat of deep sea mining. We are among the lowest emitters in the world, but we suffer the impacts tenfold in food systems, health displacement, loss of culture. And I note that as we gather online today, COP is going to finishing its first week in Belém in Brazil. And for many of our communities, this is what security looks like day to day. So the Ocean of Peace Declaration actually sits right at this intersection. It is being asked to carry the weight of historical injustice, current great power competition, and the planetary emergency. And that helps explain its careful language with leaders trying to protect space for cooperation with all partners, while also signaling their discomfort with militarization and ecological harm. The risk, of course, is that in trying to please everyone, the text becomes too elastic to protect anyone. And so several gaps become clear as churches, academics, women and youth movements read the final text. First, there's no explicit commitment to demilitarization. The declaration speaks about peace and security, but does not name or reject foreign military bases, live fire exercises, nuclear armed or nuclear powered deployments, or arms buildups in our waters. Without these red lines, there is a danger that militarization is normalized under peaceful language. Second, there is very little about decolonization and self-determination. Long-standing struggles in Kanaki, New Caledonia, West Papua, Maui, French Polynesia, and elsewhere are not clearly reflected. And for many Pacific people, peace is impossible while their political status and human rights remain unresolved. Third, the declaration does not foreground internal violence, particularly the epidemic of violence against women and children, and the way militarized masculinities shape our societies. Nor does it strongly articulate our indigenous spiritual visions of peace as wholeness and balance. And finally, it lacks a clear set of foundational principles, the rocks of the ocean of peace, if you will, that everything else must align with. And without these anchors, the declaration can become a line in the sand, very impressive, but easily eroded by the waves of geopolitical interest and economic pressure. So what is in the declaration that we can work with? Despite these gaps, there is real substance that churches, civil society, governments, and communities can build on. The declaration affirms the Pacific as a region of peace and reiterates our identity as a nuclear-free region committed to international law. It clearly identifies climate change and environmental degradation as central to security threats, not side issues. Now, that language can be used to strengthen climate diplomacy, loss and damage claims, and resistance to harmful extractive practices. It also highlights human security, the well-being of people, not just states. Excuse me. And it acknowledges the role of women, young people, communities, civil society, faith-based organizations as well in creating and sustaining peace. So that opens the door for more systematic inclusion of these actors in a national and regional implementation plan. The declaration stresses regional unity and integration, giving us a mandate to deepen cooperation on things like unexploded ordnance clearance, ocean governance, and climate resilience. And it frames the Ocean of Peace as an overarching platform under which other instruments, from the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons to women, peace, and security commitments, can be connected. So all of this gives us language and political cover to organize, to educate, to advocate, and to hold our leaders and their partners to account. But the biggest whales in the room, I use whale rather than elephant because we are in the oceanic state. The biggest whales in the room are sovereignty and self-determination. We talk about an ocean of peace, but for whom and on whose terms? Some Pacific territories remain under French or Indonesian rule. Others live with defense arrangements and compacts that give outside powers significant control over airspace, seas, and security choices. And if we avoid these questions, peace can easily slide into pacification, keeping things quiet without addressing deeper injustice. There is also the question of indigenous sovereignty over land, sea, and resources. Customary tenor and ocean custodianship are central to how many of our communities understand peace. Yet large-scale projects, from military facilities to mining and mega infrastructure, are often negotiated far from the village with a weak or symbolic constitution. The bell has been heard, probably at the right time for what I'm saying also. But an Ocean of Peace conversation must therefore grapple with those who get to define security, who signs the agreements, and who bears the risk. And for me, that means recentering Pacific peoples, especially those still struggling for self-determination, and insisting that any regional peace frameworks honors their rights, their voices, and their visions. Otherwise, the whales will keep swimming just below the surface of our beautifully worded declarations. And finally, an ocean of peace worthy of our Pacific people must be decolonized, denuclearized, and demilitarized. And anything less is not peace, only managed insecurity. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hand back to Liz. Manaka.
Thank you very much, Reverend James. That's a very fantastic call to action for all of us who are here. And I'd just like to thank everybody for those who have introduced yourselves in the chat, because we're building a community here. We have people from all over the world, especially all around the Pacific Ocean. And I'd like to remind you too that we have opportunity for questions and answers after the presentations, which hopefully will take about an hour, and then we'll have half an hour, or maybe a bit over half an hour for questions after that. So if you'd like to, thinking of a question as we're listening, please pop your question in the Q&A, which is underneath all of the rest of the Zoom paraphernalia there. So right, so we're coming to the rest of our speakers who are responding from the different countries. And so we have a number of voices from across the Pacific who will reflect on their local context and plans for achieving peaceful self-determination for the ocean-wide community. And our first speaker for today, I would like to introduce, and just for gender balance, I'm inviting Liana McDonald from Aotearoa. And Liana is the chair in Māori, Moriori and Indigenous Peace Studies and the co-director of Te Ao Orangamarairoa National Centre for Peace and Conflict State Studies in Dunedin at the bottom of the North Island of Aotearoa. Liana is an interdisciplinary researcher who is interested in how Māori and other Indigenous groups are positioned in colonised countries and how they resist oppression. Kia ora, Liana. Welcome.
Kia ora.
We'll give you a bell at around 4 minutes so that we can finish around 5 minutes, if that's okay. Thank you.
Ka pai. Tēnā koutou katoa. E mihi ana kia koutou mō tō koutou whakatau mai i a mātou i tēnei rā. Ngā mihi ki te kai whakahaere Liz, tēnā koe. Ngā mihi ki te kai kōrero Rev James Bhagwan, tēnā koe. He honore nui tēnei kia tai mai, kia hono atu kia koutou I raro I te kaupapa o tēnei hui. So greetings to you all and thank you for the warm welcome today, in particularly Liz and Rev Bhagwan. It's a great honour to be here and offer 3 brief thoughts about how Aotearoa New Zealand can support the kaupapa securing an ocean of peace, Pacific Ocean of Peace. The first point I want to make about achieving or working to achieve peaceful self-determination for our ocean-wide community is education. The Ocean of Peace Declaration calls on all of us to work towards Pacific unity, involving multiple communities like women and children, as the Reverend said, towards peace and protect the vast ancestral waters that connect our peoples. For Aotearoa to play a meaningful role in that vision, we have to start with our own learning. As Liz mentioned, I stepped into the role of co-director of Te Ao Orangamarairoa early this year. And like many people in Aotearoa, I had to acknowledge how little I knew about Pacific geopolitics. Our schooling really teaches the histories of our Pacific nations, and it barely teaches our own, to be honest. When I was in my mid-30s, standing at the Wairo Bar, the top of the South Island, with my iwi cousin, who's a historian, I was reminded that we descend from the East Polynesian travellers buried there. And so these whakapapa ties are deep and intimate and oceanic, yet they're largely invisible in state education. And this silence shapes how we think about our obligations to one another, which leads me to my second point. Aotearoa New Zealand can't support peaceful self-determination in the Pacific without confronting our imperial footprint. When I interviewed for this role last year, I was asked what I knew about the New Zealand realm, and I couldn't answer. Now, I understand that Aotearoa continues to exert legal, political and economic control over the Cook Islands, Niue, Tokelau, but we're not just a friendly neighbour. We're a state with imperial legacies that still shape sovereignty, mobility and resource access across the region. And so if we're serious about the declaration of the Ocean of Peace, we have to reckon with our role in the region's unequal power dynamics. Mid-year, I attended a whole-of-life philosophies course at the Pacifica Communities University in Suva, Fiji. And the program challenges Eurocentric development narratives that are still imposed across the region. We stayed with local communities for 2 nights on this course, and so I was hosted on Koma Island, where rising sea levels, natural disasters and environmental degradation are reshaping everyday life. Yet the community retains a strong attachment to whenua and moana, their fishing practices and their intergenerational responsibilities. And so I saw that the resilience is relational and that people and ocean and ancestors and future generations are treated as one interconnected community. And that experience on the course contrasted sharply with a visit to the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. So the course members there heard a polished presentation by a director from New Zealand about the 250 strategy for the Blue Pacific, its implementation. But I kept thinking about Goma, wondering how much influence communities like them actually have in those high-level decisions. And during Q&A time at the end, students asked the director why some nations are excluded from PIV's membership, why Global North funding bypasses communities, why decolonisation and Indigenous knowledge aren't priorities in the document, and why West Papua has vanished from a map in the strategy document. And so, you know, those questions spoke directly to the Ocean of Peace's declaration, the call for truth-telling and for resilient communities. Which brings me to my final point, the need for Aotearoa New Zealand to adopt a position of principled neutrality. So neutrality sends a clear message to global superpowers like the US and China that we refuse to be absorbed into their geopolitical competition across our ocean. Aotearoa has a history of taking principled stands, our nuclear-free stand, our support for international law, our refusal to participate in the Iraq War. But neutrality isn't only about protecting ourselves, it's about supporting our whanaunga, our relatives across the Pacific, who face intense strategic pressure from external powers. And so when your whānau are being pushed around or decisions are made about them but without them or without their consent, you know, you don't stay silent. You step forward. And neutrality is not passive. It's an active refusal of militarisation and a commitment to redirecting resources towards climate resilience, ocean stewardship, Indigenous self-determination and community-led justice. It's ensuring that our region is guided by whakapapa obligations, not the strategic interests of distant powers. Neutrality honours the heart of the Ocean of Peace Declaration, that the Pacific is not a battleground, but a homeland, an ancestral ocean that binds us together and demands our collective protection. And so, very quickly rush through these points, but to reiterate the three areas where Aotearoa New Zealand can support peaceful self-determination in the Pacific: education about our deep whakapapa and relational ties with Pacific nations, confronting Aotearoa's imperial legacies and taking responsibility for their impacts, and adopting principled neutrality that centres Pacific sovereignty and rejects militarisation. Thank you.
Kia ora, Liana. Thank you so much. And congratulations on your recent appointment. It's wonderful to have you in that role. And we really appreciate your very thoughtful and in-depth analysis of and grappling, you know, and your acknowledging your honesty as we all grapple with these problems and issues. And by the way, this seminar is created by the Pacific Peace Network, which is a group of us from all over around the Pacific who work together and there's a whole team of us behind working together to create today. And I was very glad to meet Liana at the International Peace Researchers Conference in Taranaki last week. So fantastic. Next, I would like to come across to Papua New Guinea and welcome Gordon Walimbu, who is a political scientist and the president of the UPNG Catholic Students Association. Gordon will review the PukPuk Treaty recently agreed between Australia and Papua New Guinea. Welcome, Gordon.
Gordon, can you unmute?
Are you there, Gordon? Hello.
Gordon seems to be muted still. I'm not sure if there's a technical issue.
Gordon, please keep trying, and we might need to come back to you shortly. And so, Bryce, is it okay if we come to you next?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll introduce Bryce, and who is from Hawaii. Bryce Puesta Takanaka is a youth organizer and lead researcher for the Hawaii Peace and Justice, a Hawaiian-led grassroots organization committed to promoting peace, justice, social justice, and sovereignty. And Bryce is also a PhD candidate at the Yale School of Public Health, Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences, and studying the impacts of militarism and tourism on Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiians, health outcomes across Kauai Pai Aina. Kia ora, Bryce, and welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm gonna stop sharing really quickly.
Oh, hello, Gordon. I see you now. We'll come to you after this. Thank you.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. I know I have not a lot of time, so I'll try to I'll get through this eloquently as possible. But aloha mai kako. Mahalo nui for allowing me to be here today. Today I'm just giving a super brief recap of some of the most, if not biggest, threats to peace, self-determination, and justice in Hawaii, particularly the US military and the upcoming leases set to expire. So we don't have enough time in the day, let alone 5 minutes, to discuss all the harms the U.S. military causes in Hawaii, but I really wanted to ground us in some key events that happened to understand these modern formations. According to Kanaka Maoli historian Jonathan Osorio, he states in his book that the single most critical dismemberment of Hawaiian society was the Mahele, or the division of lands, that transformed Aina, or land, into private property. And this wasn't just about stealing land, although it certainly does involve stealing land. It also relied on the maintenance and infrastructures that make colonization and capitalism an ongoing process through infrastructures like the military. So between 1875 to 1893, with the late rulers of King David Kalakaua and his successor, Queen Liliuokalani, were essentially harassed, manipulated, and forced over this period to really relinquish power of the Hawaiian people to form a new provisional government with settler and U.S. military interests. And then fast forward years later, militarization continues to accelerate in Hawaii, particularly during World War II, which resulted in a 7-year martial law confiscating thousands of acres of land. And then once statehood happened in 1959, 180 acres of ceded land were retained by the military. From these acres, 30,000 were actually returned to the state, but then quickly released in 1964 to the US military for 65 years at the cost of $1. And yes, you heard that right. On the left, you can see the actual lease here. And while the military leases are set to expire soon in 2029, there are processes required to come to a record of decision. And in order to come to a record of decision, the military needs to abide by certain federal and state policies to complete these comprehensive environmental impact statements with community and cultural practitioner involvement, undergoing review from our Board of Land and Natural Resources. And recently, you see on the right, there's another document that was recently posted, which was a letter written by our government to the U.S. Army Secretary, signing a non-binding statement of his proposal for potential land condemnation and a $10 billion settlement, claiming that this is really to reinvest this into the people of Hawaii, but really to reinvest this into the very military infrastructures that are contaminating, polluting, desecrating, and causing a lot of violence to Kanaka and to Aina on Hawaii. So these settlements are potentially dangerous, and these fast-tracking processes have been profoundly rejected by the Hawaiian community and could lead to prevent any future opportunities challenging these leases in the future. And just to quickly share a little bit about Hawaii Peace and Justice and kind of the work that we're doing. We're committed to peace, justice, and sovereignty in Hawaii, but also across Moana Nui and all oppressed nations in the world. We center educating, collaborating, and empowering our youth population through various nonviolent direct actions with the focus of the upcoming leases. And youth are particularly important and vulnerable, given that they are key targets of the military pipeline in Hawaii to maintaining those systems. So we really intentionally go out to build Pulina and empower our OPO to be the protagonists in their own stories, to really reimagine alternative futures that don't center relying and joining the war machine, but also being capable of leading us into a future for Hawaii. And I know I'm going to run out of time, so I'm just going to quickly say that some successful stuff that we did this past year were our banner wave and mass mobilization of Pohakuloa and Oahu BLNR meetings that rejected both environmental impact statements from the military. We also provide oral and written testimonies to the Kauai EIS in progress right now, along with other community programs like our Pu'uloa biking detour. So we're also not alone in this fight against occupation with Kokua and Kuleana alongside other Hawaiian-led organizations and coalitions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryce. That was a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it, and good luck with it all. And it's good that we can work together again. So our next speaker, we'd like to come to Gordon from Papua New Guinea. Gordon Walimbu is a political scientist and the president of the UPNG Catholic Students Association. And Gordon will look at the PukPuk Treaty recently agreed between Australia and Papua New Guinea. Welcome, Gordon.
Gordon, can you unmute?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your time for connecting me. Greetings from what must be Bonakiake. That's how we have a lot of languages, so that's how we say good day in our Tolai language. I would jump into our conversation. Firstly, as you all know, I just finished from the university. Last year, I graduated. When I was in the university, I led a protest against our government signing the Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States. That was back in 2023. Okay, fast forward this year, our government decided to join with the Australians and sign the PukPuk Treaty, which just recently signed. My view on this, I've always been like, I was telling the government that these signings and these treaties or agreements that we are going into signing with the United States and Australia are against the principle of the forefathers that said the principle that our foreign policy should be friends to all and enemies to none. So I was emphasizing this while I was a student and also in this day while I graduated and I have joined the workforce, but I am still an advocate of our government being, ignorant of our call in signing these agreements with PukPuk Treaty with Australia and DCA, the Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States. So I personally have that feeling that our country is now dragged into, as they say in a proverb, African proverb, that when two big elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. I fully convinced that a small Pacific Island nation states, Papua New Guinea, and other island states that we are in the Oceania region, I think that these big countries, their geopolitical ambitions that they're coming in, they are gonna make a lot of problems, will create a lot of problems in our country. And also our sovereignty. The recently signed PukPuk Treaty between my government and the Australian government, the Albanese and the Marape Rosso government, it basically states that most of the defense and capabilities and the airspace, everything that the defense force of Papua New Guinea has, now it's going to be like that agreement enters Australia to, it's almost like, I shall use this word, takeover. I know, as an independent state, I don't see any need of us. Of course, we can have agreements, but we cannot allow other states to come and take in charge of our defense, especially this is sovereignty. This is a sovereignty issue. That's what I have been emphasizing, and I want to just put this to all of us that we are an independent state. We got our independence, and our foreign policy clearly states that we are friend to all and enemy to none. So signing agreements with the Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, and then the PukPuk Treaty that recently signed with Australia, basically, it goes against our Melanesian principle, friends to all and enemies to none. Let me also include, I'm also a honors student, and I'm writing my honors thesis on how, as Papua New Guinean and Melanesian and Pacific Island states can effectively work with the two rival powers, especially China and the United States. They are always going to be here, they're not going back. But as Melanesians or Pacific Islanders, I should say, what are some of our traditional ways? What are some of our values that we can be able to cater the two powerful forces that are coming in? So I've written my thesis on it. It's still on the pipeline. I haven't submitted yet due to some of the problems that I had with the lecturers and the school, the University of Papua New Guinea. I was not being able to get in through, but it's still with me and I'm working on it. So my understanding of these agreements as a Papua New Guinean, as a Melanesian, and as a Pacific Islander, when these two states coming in, we have to have our own grounds. How are we going to work with them? We are not going to allow the states just coming in and do whatever they want to do with us. We are an independent state, and we have to set some sort of boundaries, some sort of standards that whoever come into our country, we are an independent state. And if you want to work with us in defense, in security, in other areas of like whatever, you have to come in our own standard or our own whatever we want expectations, I should say. So that's what I've been emphasizing, and we are doing it here in my country. So my thesis is basically about consensus. That's one of the idea that I went in and I proposed it. If as Melanesians, what our forefathers, our way of life, how we lived with different tribes. Papua New Guinea, as you know, is more than 800 tribes and languages. So how we were able to live in these ages, how many ages, thousands of years, our fathers have been lived, our forefathers have been lived, how they have actually managed to live together. There are some wisdom of the past, our Melanesian wisdom. How are we going to apply them to the current stage? So basically, as the bell rang, what I'm working and what I'm doing on my honors thesis is basically about using our past Melanesian wisdom to how we can settle these issues that are coming, like PukPuk Treaty, DCA. United States and China are not going anywhere. But as Papua New Guineans, we have to be friends to all and enemies to none, using our own Melanesian way. I thank you so much for your ears, and I should end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Wonderful to hear from you, and welcome to the Pacific Peace Network. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you for a very interesting take on from your part of the world. And remember, if you've got any questions, if you'd like to ask a question, please put it in the Q&A. And also a reminder, the neutrality petition that the Pacific Peace Network put together earlier this year, it's still open for signing, and Liana mentioned the importance of, and others have mentioned the importance of neutrality, and if we were all neutral, then we wouldn't be having these endless wars. So please sign the neutrality petition and share it. Okay, now we'd like to come across to Japan now. at the top of the Pacific. And a big warm welcome to you, Satoko. Satoko Oka Norimatsu is editor, author, and translator of Responsibility for Justice, From the World to Okinawa, Okinawa Is Not Alone, Voices for Okinawa from the World. Welcome, Satoko.
Hello, thank you for your introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay. Okay, I'm a journalist living between Canada and Japan, and today I'm in Tokyo. I'd like to give a brief overview of recent development around Japan and Okinawa in relation to the accelerating war preparations against China in conjunction with the US. Let me share my screen. I don't know if you can see this.
Yes, we can.
Well, Japan now has its first female prime minister, Takaichi Sanae. She's a political successor of Abe Shinzo, who dismantled the post-war constitutional promise of the renunciation wall, enabling Japan to exercise the so-called collective self-defense right, the right to engage in U.S. wars against designated adversaries, in today's context meaning China. Upon taking office, Takaichi announced a review of the 3 core national security documents adopted in December 2022. These documents redefine China as an unprecedented strategic challenge, introduced counter-strike capability, and prioritized long-range missiles, unmanned systems, cyber and space warfare units, and deeper integration with U.S. military planning. They also committed 43 trillion yen, which is $300 billion over 5 years to missiles, drones, cyber tools, and ammunition stockpiles, while offering little on diplomacy or conflict prevention. Takaichi says she will revise these by 2026, emphasizing new forms of warfare, such as drone swarms and intensified cyber operations. It is more likely than not that her revision will be more escalatory. Today, Japanese media are all reporting that Takaichi plan to revisit the so-called 3 non-nuclear principle that the Japanese government upheld since 1967, which says not having, not making, and not introducing nuclear weapons. Takaichi wrote in her book last year that the non-introduction clause could be an obstacle for the U.S. provision of its extended deterrence. On November 7th, she stated in a diet that a Taiwan contingency, so-called, could be classified as a survival threatening situation or sonritsuki jitai under the 2015 security legislation or the war legislation forced through the Abe by Abe Shinzo, despite nationwide protests, including self-immolation cases. The law defines such a situation as one in which an attack on a country with close ties to Japan threatens Japan's survival and endangers the people's right to live life and liberty, even if Japan is not attacked. By directly linking to a Taiwan conflict to Japan's national existence, Takaichi signaled a far more explicit Japanese role in a Taiwan crisis. China reacted sharply. Japanese opposition parties urged Takaichi to retract the statement, but she refused. The US, meanwhile, appears to be keeping deliberate silence, giving it a tacit approval. As usual, the US uses its client states to do all the dirty work, just as it uses Ukraine to weaken Russia and Israel to destroy Palestine. The latest event only added to China's distrust of Japan in its commemorative year, the 80th anniversary of the victory of the resistance war against Japan and the anti-fascist war. On September 3rd, Beijing held a major ceremony with 26 state leaders, including Russian President Putin and DPRK Chairman Kim Jong-un. The Japanese government denounced it as an anti-Japan event and told Japanese nationals in China to stay home for safety when war commemorations were held. Japan even pressured other countries not to attend. Imagine Germany doing this on a Victory in Europe Day. Japan has also banned major Chinese films this year, including Dead to Rights, which depicted the human suffering of the Nanjing massacre. The Japanese public is largely influenced by the denialist narrative that the Nanjing massacre didn't happen. Even the Nagasaki Atomic Bomb Museum is diluting its description, changing Nanjing massacre to Nanjing incident, reinforcing China's suspicion that Japan is whitewashing its aggression. For China, Taiwan issue is a historical as well as contemporary. Japan colonized Taiwan as spoils of its first war of aggression against China in 1894 to 95. Any Japanese involvement in Taiwan evokes memories of Japan's wars in China that killed tens of millions of its citizens. Perhaps its sentiment is most clearly expressed in the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson's November 13th statement. Japan must immediately correct and retract its malicious remarks. Otherwise, Japan will bear all the consequences that arise from them. If Japan dares to intervene militarily in a situation across the Taiwan Strait, such an act would constitute aggression. China will meet it head-on and deliver a powerful blow. We issue a stern warning to the Japanese, reflect deeply on its historical crimes, and immediately stop interfering in China's internal affairs and engaging in provocative line-crossing actions. Japan must not play with fire over the Taiwan question. Those who play with fire will surely be burned. It is also a warning to Washington. Indeed, Japan's war preparation is accelerating, making use of the Ryukyu chain of islands, again using a historical colony that Japan forcefully annexed at the end of the 19th century. Over the past several years, Japan has transformed its entire southwest into an uninterrupted military belt, from Yonaguni to Ishigaki, through Miyako and Amami to Okinawa, Mageshima, and Western Honshu, filled with missile units, radar stations, new bases, ammunition depots, joint training facilities, and expanding U.S.-Japan force integration, all despite heavy local opposition and residents' concern for safety when war comes to their islands. Military analyst Konishi Makoto says, conflict over Taiwan will not occur if Japan says no. If Japan refuses to allow U.S. forces to use its bases, airports, and ports, the U.S. cannot initiate or execute such a conflict. Japan's anti-war and peace movements therefore play an increasingly crucial role. I cannot agree more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and what a powerful presentation. And we look forward to having some discussion at the end of this, so please put your questions there. And once again, our neutrality petition, please sign that. Okay, so our next speaker, we are coming across to the Philippines, and we are welcoming Galileo de Guzman Castillo, who is the Program Officer with focus on the Global South, a collective of committed activists working with grassroots communities, civil society organizations, social movements, and policymakers in a common quest for ecological, social, and economic justice. Welcome, Galileo.
Thank you, Liz, and Kalinao for greetings of peace from the Philippines. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all fellow travelers in various people's struggles, wherever you are. And thank you, Pacific Peace Network, for the invitation and opportunity to speak in this webinar and share our insights on achieving peaceful self-determination for the ocean-wide community. I'm Galileo de Guzman Castillo. I'm with Focus on the Global South, and as Liz pointed out, we're an activist think tank based in Asia, and we delve into the mutually reinforcing, overlapping, and compounding crises that have become hallmarks of our times. From corporate-driven economic policies that decimate local livelihoods and destroy our oceans and the environment, to increasing militarism and attacks against peasant, fisherfolk, and indigenous communities and human rights defenders. This year, in fact, we are celebrating our 30 years of continuing struggles for climate justice, the commons and public economy, and real security. While world leaders, policymakers, and public authorities talk about equality and peace, the neoliberal authoritarian nexus has solidified over the recent decades, fueled by perpetual wars that have gained ascendancy across regions. We said in our statement early this year that the persisting conditions of discrimination rooted in race, patriarchy, caste, ethnicity, and class, as well as the continuing trajectory of climate and environmental breakdown, are all ensuring that future generations will be at the servitude of a wealthy, privileged, racially and socially dominant minority, of imperialist warmongers and the capitalist ruling class. And through the course of the century, we, peoples from the global south, have found ourselves in the crosshairs of geopolitical contestations and conflicts. In the Asia Pacific, military spending, armed presence, and naval deployments have increased with the intensification of the power struggle and rivalry between the United States and China. In my home country, in the Philippines, the current government, the Marcos regime, has granted its erstwhile colonizer access to 4 new military facilities under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement of 2014. And this follows the US plan to make our country, the Philippines, its forward base in line with its Indo-Pacific strategy to contain China. Furthermore, with the advent of new extractivist technologies and methods and the expansion of extractivism, such as deep sea mining and quote-unquote green transition in the name of peace, security, and development, the ocean is increasingly being reframed and re-regulated as a space for the blue economy. However, such reconfiguration remains blind to irreparable ecological and social contradictions and only seeks to further the commodification of the oceans and commercialization of the lives of the ocean people through various means. And this includes, among others, the flow of private investments for supposed quote-unquote protection of marine areas and quote-unquote sustainable ecotourism, the expansion of capital-intensive and large-scale aquaculture, and the further concentration of corporate and financial actors in the decision-making over our lands and waters. The recent Declaration for an Ocean of Peace, issued at the Pacific Islands Forum in September, provides useful pathways in highlighting these contradictions and reimagining a region of peace and stability, where countries are not beholden to geopolitical rivalries between superpowers, are able to chart their own destiny, and see their people live in dignity, free from coercion and fear. And while the declaration emphasizes cooperation, cultural heritage, and a people-centered approach to development and security, notwithstanding the gaps that our keynote speaker, Rev James Bhagwan, pointed out earlier, it also exposes the real implications of how access to and control over ocean space is distributed, who are dispossessed first, and who are dispossessed most, and who are included or excluded from the processes and politics that decide this. I'd like to go back to the Conference of Ocean People in 2022, 3 years ago. They said that our oceanic civilization is our way of life and that we are the historical custodians of the ocean ecology. Thus, it remains imperative that we amplify diverse perspectives and lived experiences of ocean and gaseous communities that are rooted in our collective histories and cultures, wherever we are. This we do towards building a world where power is more decentralized and where a truly multilateral order is constructed through cooperation rather than imposed through either unilateral or liberal hegemony. And equally urgent and important, overcoming the obstacles in promoting real security as what we try to do in Focus on the Global South as we work together with
Hello, Galileo. I think Galileo is frozen.
Yeah, we've lost you, Galileo.
Okay, I'm sorry, Galileo. We've lost you. So if you can come back, that will be great. But in the meantime, we're going to go to Sung-hee. And Sung-hee Choi from South Korea lives in the Gangjeong village in Jeju Island. She's a great part of the Pacific Peace Network, has been for some years. And she joined the movement against the Jeju Navy base for the last 15 years. Sung-hee also works with the people opposing space militarization and rocket launches. Welcome, Sung-hee.
Hello, this is Choi Sung-hee. Many thanks to organizers. Please let me share my PPT. In 2014, when the struggle against the construction of the Jeju Navy base was in full swing, Jeju activists paid attention to the island's common history with the nearby islands like Okinawa and Taiwan, as well as their geographical and geopolitical characteristics. The island's history, which is that of oppression from the imperialism and the central government, as well as resistance against them. People in Jeju, Okinawa, and Taiwan also discussed the need to make the sea that isolates but also connects the islands into a sea of peace rather than sea of war. This is how the solidarity of the islands for a sea of peace was established. And peace camps were held every year, starting in Jeju in 2014, on the three islands, Jeju, Okinawa, Taiwan, except during the COVID-19 period. The sea between the three islands was named as the Sea for Coexistence and Peace. In 2023, a boat left Gangjong village and sailed around the islands for 107 days, wishing for the realization of the sea. This year, the peace camp was held from September 26 to 29 in Giryong, northern Taiwan, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Taiwanese activists for organizing a great peace camp. The 60 people who joined the camp from three islands and other parts of the world defined 7 sharing promises. The first one read, "We refuse to sacrifice others to gain self-determination. We refuse to build our peace upon the suffering of others, enduring military bases and weapons deployments. We demand the skies be returned to the birds, the oceans to the fish, sea turtles and dolphins, and the land to the people and ecosystems." I hope you can have a chance to see the whole text at the link shown in the bottom of the image. During this camp, a Gangjong peace activist named Hecho hopped herself on a small yacht to take part in a relief flotilla's voyage to Gaza. Before heading to Gaza, she wrote in a letter that she believed that the solidarity of many people, including Jeju, Okinawa, Taiwan, and Palestine, could break the blockade created by capital and military forces. She proved that the solidarity of the three islands is never just for the islands, but it is also linked to never only for the three islands, but it is also linked to peace in the world. Hecho's voyage to Gaza has inspired many Jeju residents and also intensified the question of what Jeju will do to stop the United States and Israel's occupation and massacres of Palestine. South Korea, the world's fifth largest military power, is one of the top 10 exporters of weapons. South Korea's arms companies like Hanwha, Korea Aerospace Industries, and like as well as Samsung and Korea National Oil Corporation are cooperating with Israel to contribute to the Palestine massacre. Recently, Hana System built a space center in the middle of Jeju Hanla Mountain that will produce the satellites, which are the eye and ear of war. The South Korean government is one of 35 countries that has yet to recognize Palestine as a state. It invited the Israel Defense Ministry and Israeli weapons companies to the Seoul Aerospace Arms Expo this October. The activists also staged a surprise performance against the backdrop of Israeli company IAI calling for Israeli ending of the killing of Palestinians. Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung unveiled South Korea's desire to build nuclear-powered submarines at the APEC meeting held in Gyeongju this year. At the beginning of his inauguration, he said that he hopes South Korea will become one of the 4 largest arms production and 3 largest AI nations. The Jeju activists' responsibility to deter the militarization of South Korea and Jeju is stronger than ever. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Song-hee. That's a fantastic presentation, and it's really good to hear about the peaceful the sea camp in Taiwan, which is bringing people together peacefully. All right, well, for our next second to last speaker, it was going to have been Kelly Tranter from Australia. Unfortunately, the video that she sent to us is not good quality. We can't really make it work. So we're going to hope to make that available later on. And in the meantime, Annette Brownlee, who is the president of Independent and Peaceful Australian Network, as well as part of PPN, is going to say a few words. And by the way, thank you to Galileo. He had just about finished his talk, so he's going to be available for more questions shortly. So let's over to you now, Annette. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And yeah, it's a shame that Kelly Tranter is her recording is unsuitable to show. But as Liz has just said, it will be available in the recording that we will make available to the 160 plus people who've registered to attend the conference, to attend this webinar. So I'll keep it very brief, but picking up on what so many of the speakers have talked about, the importance of listening and learning from the long Indigenous cultures that exist in Australia over 60,000 years, but in countries around the world and specifically and most importantly in this context throughout the Pacific. And I know, James, that was something that you spent a bit of time in your talk in emphasising. Australia is effectively a sub-imperial power working alongside the United States and other Western countries. We have sacrificed whatever sovereignty we have had to become a forward base for the United States to wage war against China. The unthinkable is being planned for, and it's being prepared for in Australia through the AUKUS agreement that I'm sure most of you are aware of, which not only involves the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines, but it involves the agreement that allows the United States to use our waters for their nuclear submarines, which they will neither confirm nor deny are carrying nuclear weapons. So not only the sea, but the air is involved with the upgrading of the airbase at Tyndall in the Northern Territory, where B-52 bombers will be housed. And again, they will neither confirm nor deny if they are carrying nuclear weapons. So it's pretty clear just exactly what we are being prepared for, as are other parts of the Pacific. And I think Nick Flores will talk about that as well. I was interested to hear about the $1 agreement for a base in, I think it was in the Philippines, and Australia too has a history of just selling off our territory to be used for, in particular, intelligence gathering. Northwest Cape on the very north of Western Australia was a peppercorn agreement. And we've got a lot of money being spent by Australia to upgrade facilities here at Stirling in Western Australia. We're looking at an East Coast nuclear submarine base. One of the things that's on my mind, and I'd be interested to ask as a question for Gordon, as Manus Island is part of Papua New Guinea, And I know that Manus has been, the naval base there has been deepened and expanded by the United States and Australia with Papua New Guinea's consent. So it's something that's on my mind, is Manus in fact going to be the East Coast base for United States submarines to operate out of? So that's just a little snapshot. I won't take any more time because we've got another speaker and hopefully have time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annette. That was a great summary of the concerns of the Australian people. And, you know, I mean, the thing we really need to be worrying about is climate change. And look what's happening. Thank you. So our final speaker for today, and it's also a pre-recording, is also part of our Pacific Peace Network whānau family from Guam, and it's Maneka Nake Flores, who is from Familian Cabeza Manok. And Nake is a queer Chamorro activist and artist from Guam. Nake has organised with several local groups to advocate for decolonisation, demilitarisation, environmental justice, reproductive rights, and LGBTQIA rights. Nake works with Prutehi Guahan, formerly Prutehi Litikayan, to confront harms from militarisation through direct action, legal strategy, public information campaigns, and advocacy, and also organises Marianas for Palestine. They are very, very busy, and we're so grateful to have the contribution. Now, Nake's recording is just over 10 minutes. It's just a little bit longer, but we're going to play it in its entirety, and then we may take a little bit more time for hearing from your questions and a little bit more back from the panel. We've had a very full panel today, so thank you, Greta. If you can play Nake's recording, please. Thank you.
Happy everyone. I'm Nake Flores from Guam, or Guahan, and it's an honor to be here with you all today to stand in solidarity with you as we resist the military-industrial complex, endless wars, and increased insecurity with increased war games with that are provocations for conflicts in the region. I'm going to go ahead and go through some slides. I'm a member of Prutehi Guahan. You can learn more about us on our Instagram. This QR code will take you to our Instagram. And of course, no justice, no peace. We really need to have an understanding of the connections of all of the historic and systemic vulnerabilities we share. Those of us who are burdened with not just US bases, but also bases of other foreign nations or bases of our own militaries. The harmful activities that contaminate our lands and waters, desecrate sacred areas, and make our communities more vulnerable. And so here are some of the issues, of course, that create conflicts, war, true security risks. The climate crisis. This is the main crisis for us in the Pacific right now. And unfortunately, funding for climate justice is not a priority for many of the world governments as they prioritize expanding their militaries. Poverty, and of course we understand the ways how people are kept in cycles of poverty for war preparation as well. US intervention triggering instability, and also imperialist political and economic competition in the region. Guam is a military colony in an unincorporated territory of the United States, and our colonial territorial status does impact the way we can advocate about the impacts resulting from US militarization and expansion here. And this is the case for many other colonies or occupied areas. And or the issue is also coercive and restrictive agreements. Here's some examples, of course, of some of those agreements that affect our region. But especially in Micronesia, the compacts of free association are really problematic because they allow the US military to occupy air, land, and sea throughout Micronesia at any time. And we're seeing them flex that might. And we're also seeing how it's related to the severe neglect and underdevelopment from the US in Micronesia, especially after World War II, after the devastating battles of World War II, and of course the nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. We have unresolved issues of violent crimes. Long histories of military sexual violence is something a lot of us have in common. History of environmental degradation and contamination, issues of accountability. We have problems with accountability, transparency, and underreporting. A lot of times we don't find out about the harms until much later. Of course, we are burdened with nonstop war games and very frustrating comment periods that don't really allow for enough time for our communities to respond, but also don't always have the proper analysis, the full analysis that's needed for us to understand the impacts of military activities in our regions. Unfortunately, sometimes these comment periods are the only way we can participate in the decision-making around military activities and federal activities in our islands. But even as frustrating they are and as unfriendly they are to Indigenous people, we must participate in that process to make sure our opposition is documented and also that hopefully it makes an impact on some of those plans. A lot of us share serious issues of water contamination, land taking, and displacement. A lot of us are experiencing housing crises, healthcare crises, food and water security crises. And of course, we're seeing a suppression of dissent, a rise in authoritarianism and fascism in the United States and trickling out in other parts of the world. And I'm sorry, we should really fight for genuine security, and our solidarity is key to that. And this is just a little factoid here. In Guam, we have about 154,000 residents, and we have also about 21,700 military members and their families. And this is according to the last census in 2020. So these are the enduring issues. A lot of us share the same kinds of contamination, and a lot of this was kept from us, classified. So we didn't even know that we were being exposed. And at this point, for a lot of us, it's long-term exposure, causing serious health impacts in all of our communities, making our health systems even more weak and more depleted. And some of the contamination, of course, includes Agent Orange, dieldrin, PFAS, PFOA, lead, oil spills. That's something a lot of us share. Unexploded ordnance, negligent hazardous waste disposal, nuclear radiation and contamination. This can be from nuclear subs, or fallout from the tests in the Marshall Islands that actually reached all the way to Palau, Guam, Saipan, and the United States won't include Guam in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. And of course, that's because it would open the floodgates for compensation for everybody else impacted, and especially the Marshall Islands. On the right here, these are some pictures of a recent exercise here. And this is actually a helicopter from Japan firing what looks like a missile into the waters of Guam. We have issues where a lot of this is left, not remediated, not picked up, left in the ocean, and then lack of legal obligation. Of course, those agreements mentioned earlier have a lot of limitations, and sometimes even U.S. laws prevent them from being obligated to correct the harms that they've caused through military activities. And an example of that is their law that prevents the transport of hazardous waste from sovereign nations to the United States. And sadly, that has meant that the nuclear waste they've left in the Marshall Islands remains there. And they use that law to say that they can't remove it because now the Marshall Islands is a sovereign nation. And of course, a lot of us go through these joint military training exercises that often connect our islands, whether sometimes it's Guam, the Northern Marianas and Palau, or Guam, the Philippines, Hawaii. We're all connected in a lot of these massive war games. These are just some examples: Reforpac, Freedom Shield, Pacific Vanguard, Cove North, Valiant, Shield, Brimpac, Talisman Saber, Exercise, Sea Dragon, Pacific Dragon, Resolute Dragon, Freedom Edge, Bushido Guardian, and of course the Bala Katan games. And right now in Guam, the Quad exercises between Japan, Australia, the United States are happening right now. It's actually the Malabar 2025 exercises taking place here That includes submarine warfare training and surface warfare training. And so we've got the Australian Royal Navy here, the Japan Air Force here right now with India doing this training here in Guam. Right as now up until the 18th of this month. I like to show this map. It shows how the United States is setting up all these islands and countries in the Pacific and Asia to be sites of U.S. force projection. They call these the island chain, and they keep using language. This is all to protect the homeland. That was all somehow part of the homeland. And you can see Hawaii here to New Zealand here, American Samoa, here's Guam, the Northern Marianas, Yap, and Palau, and Okinawa, the Philippines, Singapore, Korea is in here, Taiwan, Japan. So these are the first island chain. Of course, that's all the language that war with China is inevitable, and they need to build up these areas to protect free and open Indo-Pacific. This is an image of all of the places where the United States already has submarines stationed. Hawaii and Guam are there, Australia, of course, and the same islands, first island chain, second and third. These are just some graphics of some of the ongoing issues here in Guam, the Guam flight missile test that started last December, and the establishment of the missile defense system. This is the open detonation area. We're actually engaged in a lawsuit against the permit application for this. This is the divert airfield in Tinian. If Guam is devastated in a conflict, the United States military plans to quickly transfer a lot of their resources here. This is the same airfield where the Enola Gay took off with the atomic bombs that landed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Of course, the world has never recovered from that. I mentioned earlier that Palau is also in the island chain. Both Palau, Yap, the Marshall Islands all have are all being sort of looked at. Yap right now, they're looking at the United States military wants to expand their airport as well to sort of be like a divert airfield, like the Northern Marianas. There's a lot of mixed opinions on that. It's very problematic because they're trying to give a lot of money to Yap in order to use their airport, and it really shouldn't happen there at all. The United States also has 5 projects in Palau, all of which are in violation of the laws of Palau. This is an image of the Tactical Mobile Over the Horizon Radar, or TACMOR project. And so, of course, we need to demand genuine security. We need to build solidarity to resist U.S. imperialism in the military-industrial complex. We need to demand decontamination, remediation, removal of bases and land return, and as well as reparations for healthcare. As you know, we've all been harmed by a lot of military contamination. We have to demand justice for military sexual violence and crimes of war. We have to fight for decolonization of occupied lands and peoples. We must resist AUKUS, and of course, we must resist, by extension, deep sea mining that includes the removal of minerals for weapons manufacturing. And it is the new form of colonization, the new attack on sovereignty in the Pacific. And the Trump administration just now opened a comment period to start deep sea mining in the Marianas. And it's not just the United States, though, that we have to resist. We have to really resist all of the sovereign nations in the Pacific and in Asia who are trying to start deep sea mining or already have rights to deep sea mining as part of the new arms race, and we must resist. It's an honor to be here. I'm so grateful. Sizos Masi, and we must fight to be a zone of peace and nuclear-free Pacific. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nake, for your recording. That was a fabulous presentation. Very, very interesting and very chilling. Before I hand over to Annette and Greta, who are going to handle this session, the questions, and we have a short time for questions, I'd just like to thank the team who put this together, and also to thank our wonderful panelists today, Satoko, Gordon, Galileo, Kelly, Liana, Nake, Bryce, Sung-hee, and of course our wonderful main speaker, Reverend James. And I'm hoping that all of the panelists will be able to help answer the questions. And just to remind you too that this recording will be available very shortly in the next few days. So, you know, there's so much information here we can listen to again, and please share it around the network. So thanks everybody. And now I'm going to hand over to Annette and Greta. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thanks very much, Liz, and I echo the thanks that you've just given to our wonderful speakers. We have had three questions submitted, and that should just lead very nicely into the end of this webinar. So from Michelle Smith, do the panelists think it is possible for Pacific Island nations to abolish their militaries, as Puerto Rico has done? Who would like to take that question?
Sure, I'll give it a go.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, Annette. It's a great idea. Unfortunately, you know, at the end of my presentation, I talked about the Ocean of Peace being firstly decolonized, then demilitarized, and denuclearized. And I think we have to recognize that militaries were part of the colonization process. And if I speak from where I'm living at the moment in Fiji, the military is still part of the power structure of the nation. And so it's a great idea, but it has been embedded into the political systems in many spaces. And so I think it is part of the ongoing conversation around decolonization. It's interesting. Fiji has a large military army, a standing army, but a very small navy. And that's one of the key things that we see, that militaries in many spaces are used as a way to keep control of power, whereas the actual security work around, protecting maritime borders, illegal fishing, the influx of methamphetamines and other drugs into our islands is at a minimum because we don't have navies. I'm not saying that we should have more larger militaries, but what I'm saying is it's all designed about maintaining power. And until that changes, we will not see this work on demilitarization, which is a shame.
Oh, you're muted, Annette.
Thank you, James. That makes a lot of sense. The next question from Joseph Assertia is along the same lines, I suppose. Galileo from the Philippines mentioned the issue of dispossession. A few speakers have emphasized decolonization, and Bryce mentioned capitalist exploitation. This reminds me that working class people in rich countries share socio-political, geopolitical interests with colonized people throughout the Pacific. But those interests are rarely spoken of, such as how to stop US and European pirates like US President Trump. What can we do as advocates of peace to build solidarity with working people, to non-violently resist further dispossession and colonizing? I have in mind what the US is doing to Venezuela, but also I'm thinking of the history of US exploitation and bullying China and Korea. It sort of comes with another question from Anne Wright, which I think I might add on to that to any of the panelists is, do you think that the recent meetings between Trump and Xi Jinping have reduced the threat of major war happening in our part of the world? So I might ask Satoko, if you might like to comment on any of those aspects of the questions. It's a big one.
And then the question that President Xi Jinping and Trump's meeting had any effect on preventing the war. I think it does, but by principle, I think always meeting is always better than not meeting. Like the President Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin, there's some criticism or skepticism about it, but for 4 years, like Biden didn't meet him once, and at least on the day that the leaders are meeting, there's not going to be a war. So, so that's my principle. But for example, when Takaichi, the new Japanese Prime Minister, and she met and had some diplomatic exchanges, and on the next day, she changes everything by provocating about Taiwan. And for a lot of leaders, well, for Chinese leaders especially, the face saving is very important. So if you just met and your face is smashed the next day, maybe the meeting is maybe not better if you don't have it. So the U.S. China, I believe it is principally the U.S. that's provoking China. If you just simply look at the facts, like all the bases surrounding China, all the military buildup, I don't have to tell you all that, and military exercises and provocative wars and Department of War and economic war and propaganda war. Like if you all like the D's speak more than words. So I think any meeting has to be accompanied with the convincing D's, that reflect what's spoken at the meeting. And right now, I'm not seeing any of that. I'm not seeing reverse direction of any of the provocatory D's that the U.S. is doing against China. So yes, so
thanks very much.
I think if the leaders should try to match their deeds to their words. Yeah, that's my comment for that question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think within Joseph's question, there was sort of a question about how we mobilise working people, and it does make me come to the role of trade unions in the communities in which we live. James, it's one of the things from Fiji that I'm pretty keen to know a little bit more about the trade union movement in Fiji and how actively involved in these, geopolitical Pacific-wide issues that you see there.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about colonization, we're actually continuing to reflect on neo-colonization these days, and the neoliberal economic paradigm. How we are exporting workers from the Pacific to Australia, to New Zealand, and so we have bought into a capitalist narrative. There's a lot of narratives that need to change in this space. And with regards to the way in which countries in the Pacific are signing on to military allegiances, these are all tied into economic priorities that the countries have. And so we find, in the context of climate change, that because Pacific Island countries are not getting the equity that they need in terms of adaptation funds, loss and damage funds, they're either taking loans, which place them further in debt, or they're signing up to agreements in order to receive bilateral aid. And many of these issues then come down to the failure of multilateralism. We talk about Pacific regionalism in the Pacific. We talk about the strength of regionalism. But when it comes to these issues, we then use sovereignty, national sovereignty, as an excuse to focus only on bilateralism. So it is a big challenge for us. Our trade unions are dealing with domestic issues as small island developing states, and I think that's really what's going on in many of the cases. We are so busy looking at what's happening in front of us within the reef. We're not looking outside the reef. We're not looking beyond the horizon. And that is cause for major concern. We're still dealing with very much focused on domestic issues. And that means that there's not enough of us focusing on the more geopolitical issues that we are facing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great answer. I know Sung-hee had her hand up to respond to that last question as well from Korea. You need to unmute, Sung-hee. Thanks. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Well, it's a question that we cannot say yes or no, but we will need to see the two aspects of the possibilities. The one is the possibility of war, and the other is the possibility of no war, of course.
Yes.
What I see is that yes, we know that the Xi Jinping has some when they met together, the Xi Jinping and Trump met together. Xi Jinping could draw some the negotiation regarding the matter of the rare earth, right? Yes, it gives us some possibility of the less war. However, what I see is that not that part, but how our society, how our nations, how our islands are becoming intensely militarized. And then how our industry is become more and more militarized. That's what I worry the most in this time. We see the three signs of war. The one is the ideological war. As the Satoko has already mentioned, it's a hatred against the Chinese, which I see in South Korea, which is small, but now it could become grow if we do not stop. And the second part I see is how the space industry and artificial intelligence has been intensifying the militarization of our industry as well as our life. So if we remember the words of the Arundhati Roy, we make war to sell weapons. And then that's what I worry the most. So we should rather watch how our community becomes militarized and how we stop it. Yeah, that's what I think. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sung-hee. Now, just before we leave, because it is an hour and a half now, and I think that's long enough for anyone to maintain their attention and engagement, I wanted to go back to Galileo, I think it was, who we lost contact. Galileo, do you want to add anything as we wind up this wonderful webinar and having heard from so many different parts of the Pacific? Are you there, Galileo?
Yes, but I have really nothing to add to the very insightful presentation and this open forum. But just to say that really it's important that we continue linking these various people's initiatives for peace and across national borders and beyond boundaries. I'm really glad to see the participation and sharing of insights from different countries. And at the same time, it's really interesting to see the intergenerational exchanges as we co-produce knowledge together in this gathering, and as we reclaim the autonomy and the agency of peoples, not only for the present generation, but also for the future generation. I'm happy to see very young voices also in this webinar. So yeah, let's continue working collectively towards towards peace, towards justice, towards self-determination for the ocean-wide communities in the Pacific, in Asia, but also all over the world. Maybe I would say padayon. Padayon means let us move forward together in my language. So yeah, padayon, everyone.
A wonderful way to conclude our webinar today. So it was great to hear from Gordon in Papua New Guinea. This is the first time we've had a speaker from Papua New Guinea. It won't be the last time, but, you know, and to have those voices from across the Pacific, so important. We can only build on that. And I look forward to hearing from you all, meeting you all again in the year ahead. Thank you very much.
Can I just also add, thank you so much, everybody. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to hear more about what we're doing, please add your email to the chat and we will collate that, because we do have an active email list. And also,
just to say, we have everyone's email because they all registered for the event. So we will send a follow-up email and we'll make sure that they get subscribed.
Okay, thank you, Greta. Thanks so much. And we're also setting up a website, so look out for that coming soon. So yeah, have a wonderful rest of the day, rest of the weekend. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Liz, for moderating. All right. See you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.